Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me? I guess you can't tell me that because you're muted. Matt, go ahead and unmute everybody because we're going to call the roll. All right, so
Can you hear me?
everybody can see on the screen. When you're not speaking, we're going to mute you. We've unmuted your mics right now because I'm getting ready to call the roll. Please you're present and state your name for the record. Since we've done the roll call, we're going to mute everybody except the speaker and me. Once the speaker is done with their presentation, we're not taking questions in the middle of the virtual meeting. Once the speaker is done, if you have a question, you can raise your hand using the raise your hand button, which is at the bottom of the participants. You hit participants and you'll see everybody who participates. You can then raise your hand. We will see you have raised your hand. Either I or Matt Archer will then call on you. I'll call on you if I don't see you. We'll ask your question. We'll mute your mic. Who's ever presenting will answer your question. We'll see if you have a follow-up. Then we'll go to the next question. Same procedure will be used for members of the public. This is our first official virtual MPO meeting. I'd like to thank everybody for participating. We've got, I think, 88 people on. And so I think we're ready to go with calling a roll call, right, Matt?
Indeed, we are.
All right. So please respond when I call your agency, present, and then state your name for the record. So MassDOT, are there two MassDOT members here? Besides me?
MassDOT, John Bouchard.
Thank you, John.
Highway Division.
Mike. Who? John Romano, are you here? John, if you're here, I couldn't hear you. All right. Is the MBTA here?
Yes, MBTA, Samantha Silverberg.
Thanks, Sam. Is the Port Authority here? Okay. MBTA Advisory Board here.
Advice.
Okay, so let's let this one out. Okay.
Is the MAPC here?
Yes, this is Eric Barassa, MAPC.
Excellent.
But I'm hearing it from that machine right here.
Regional Transportation Advisory Council.
Advisory Council is here. Advisory Council is here. Leonard Diggins.
City of Boston. Are there two representatives from the City of Boston here?
Tom Kaz is here.
Bill Conroy here, City of Boston.
Thank you both. Now, is the City of Everett here? City of Everett? Okay.
All these people.
Town of Lexington.
Town of Lexington, Sheila Page is here.
Thanks, Sheila. Down City of Newton.
Yes, City of Newton, David Kostas is here.
Town of Arlington.
Yes, Daniel Amstutz, Town of Arlington is here.
Thank you. North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly. Are you here?
Yes, Aaron Clausen here for City of Beverly. Huh?
Thank you.
Yes, Aaron Clausen.
Thank you. SWAP, Southwest Advisory Planning Committee. Dennis, are you here? Or Glenn, I'm sorry. Glenn, are you here? All right. North Suburban Planning Council. Ina, you here? Inner Core Committee, City of Somerville.
City of Somerville's here, Tom Bent.
Thank you. Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham. Are you here?
City of Framingham is here. This is Erica Jerem.
Thank you. Magic, is the Town of Acton here? South Shore, is the Town of Rockland here? When I
did it, I just. Oh, no, okay, it says.
And are our federal partners here?
What?
They went above 100 participants, so I can't get in. So stay on if you can. Is the audio terrible?
The audio is, I can't believe they didn't take something. They're using the free one.
So Matt, mute everybody.
Using a better Zoom program. The audio is great. Here, why don't you just...
All right, man, unmute me. All right, so that didn't go as well as I would like, obviously. We have also, I'm told, reached our limit of 100 participants. So, unfortunately, we will continue. And if you are an MPO member who could not get on, please let us know, and we will try to accommodate you via conference call. All right, so this meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant, with exceptions, with the following standards. Web content accessibility guidelines 2.1, level AA standards, and revised section 508 standards. If you have any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact Rosine Foley, MPO staff at rfoley@ctps.org, or you can call her at 857-702-3704. All right, Matt, let's move on. Thank you. So here's the agenda for today. We've covered the introductions. Next up is my report, chair's report. I do not have a report other than obviously everyone knows we are in the middle of responding to COVID-19. We are working from home to the extent we can. We will maintain our existing jobs and do our existing work. This is the first go round. After we're done, if you have suggestions that you think we can make this better, please let us know. You can contact me at david.mohler, M-O-H-L-E-R, at state.ma.us. Next up is Executive Director's Report. Tegan? Matt, unmute Tegan. Tegan. Matt, can you hear me?
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Great. I think there just might be delays occasionally. So thank you, everyone. Bear with me. I do want to cover a couple of talking points. As David has been mentioning, this is our first virtual meeting, so please have patience and bear with us. Staff came together pretty quickly to organize this, and please provide feedback to us as soon as possible after this meeting so that we can work on adjusting for next week's meeting, which will be very important. If you have difficulty with communications and or have comments, I would suggest that you reach out to Kate White. It's K White, K-W-H-I-T-E, at ctps.org. Either now or later, again, if you want to communicate or leave feedback. We really do need the productive participation of board members today so that we can leave here with enough input to finalize the amendment for the current tip, as well as come back to you next week with more final scenarios or a single scenario. So that said, please, when you speak, MPO members, please turn on your video if at all possible. Don't forget to use the hand raising function, as David mentioned. Message Matt, MPO staff, through the message function if you have any questions or technical difficulties. And for audio, if possible, please use headsets or phones to reduce background noise and feedback. Okay, so those are some logistics. I do want to mention that this is our first meeting with our new manager of MPO activities, Jonathan Church. If something happens to me or my internet while I'm talking, he will step in and begin to cover me, although I hear he also may have had internet connections. So Annette Demscher will also step in if needed. We also have another new staff that was onboarded this week in our transit analysis and planning group. So we are moving forward with recruiting and onboarding people despite the work from home situation. For today, we have a pared down agenda than what we were originally proposing. We had intended to have Mass DOT and the RTAs present on their project selection process and MBTA on their ongoing projects, but given the circumstances, we felt it more important to streamline the agenda to simplify the meeting. So essentially, Matt Genova will present their projects, and we will bring them back, Mass DOT, the RTAs, and MBTA, to a later meeting to provide more of the context for their project selection. So we will still have these conversations because you will still need to vote to approve all federally funded projects. As part of this today with Matt Genova, we'll be discussing a TIP amendment that you MPO members will need to vote out for public comment next week, next Thursday. That will be Amendment 3 for the current TIP, that's fiscal years 20 through 24, which is the first 4 years of the new TIP, 21 through 25, which you will not vote out for public comment until April. So I'm just trying to keep that clarity, and Matt will speak to that more, and please ask questions if it's not clear. The TIP amendment number 3 will also require an LRTP amendment because there will be additional projects with a cost over 20 million. And so they would need to be added to the LRTP. So you will also need to vote that out for public review at the March 26th meeting next Thursday. As for April meetings, normally we would plan to meet the first Thursday, April 2nd, but that would mean 3 weeks in a row. And so, and we do need to meet at the end of April for voting on the new 2021-25 TIP. So we propose moving the April meeting dates to April 16th and April 30th. So our next 3 MPO meeting dates will be March 26th, next week, April 16th, and then April 30th. In addition, on April 2nd, we need to have a UPWP meeting next week on March 26th before the MPO meeting to discuss an amendment. The discussion of staff recommendations for studies in the UPWP and the survey results that you, the UPWP committee filled out needs to take place at a later date, not on March 26th. So we'd like to propose that we hold that UPWP virtual committee meeting April 2nd at 10 a.m. because you should have been holding that time anyway for the MPO meeting. So that meeting, I would say keep April 2nd if you were in the UPWP committee in your calendar. And with the scheduling, it could last more than an hour. And in the meantime, Sandy is also still looking for information on transportation-related studies that towns are conducting between October 1st and September 2020 and September 30th of 2021 to note in the upcoming UPWP. So if you are aware of transportation studies happening in cities and towns, for example, or otherwise, please reach out to Sandy Johnston and let him know. And that, Mr. Chair, concludes my Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Tegan. Brian Kane has a question, Matt, so can you unmute Brian?
I just wanted to
Brian,
note that,
you can go ahead.
Thank you. I am here. I couldn't be unmuted earlier, so I just wanted to note that. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. So make sure that's noted. Also, I should remind people that we are recording as always. Okay.
David, I just wanted to let you know that Jay Monty from Everett and Tom O'Rourke are also present.
Thank you.
Yep.
And now, Brian, can you do me a favor and lower your hand on the raised hand? There's a way to lower your hand so that I don't think you're asking another question.
I will find out how to do that, yes.
Thank you, Brian. Next up is public comment. So we have public comments that were sent in advance that you're going to summarize, and then we will take public comments from members of the public. I see Ruth Ann Fuller from the city of Newton, who's actually a mayor. We'll take her first. Actually, let me take the mayor first because I assume she has lots of things she's got to get done. Mayor, we're going to unmute you so you can go. Matt, unmute the mayor, please. And for the record, Mayor, state your name.
Okay. Hey, David, thank you, and to everybody else on the call. I know all of us, both in our professional lives and personal lives, are dealing with COVID-19, and you're right. A lot of decision-making going on here in Newton. Thanks for letting me weigh in. I'm so pleased, though, that you're moving forward with these important transportation projects. Despite COVID-19, moving these forward really matters. A special call out to David Kozis, who all of you know well, who's I know is on the call. I am here to speak directly about one of the projects before you. As you've probably know Commonwealth Avenue, and Route 30 are used interchangeably. They're one and the same. We have a fabulous carriageway project from Auburn Street to Ash Street here in Newton that's before you. It's being evaluated for funding for the fiscal year 20 to 25 TIP. So this project rebuilds a critical missing link on that carriageway in Newton. It's just east of a very major interchange at I-95 and I-90, and is directly borders Weston. And the carriageway is this terrific, vitally important, safe, protected, all ages bicycle and pedestrian transportation corridor. It runs all the way through Newton and extends into Brookline all the way into downtown Boston. This is a 7/10 of a mile stretch right there on Com Ave Route 30. And it's terribly disrupted right now, so that that continuous shared carriageway environment breaks down. The other good news is if we fix this, not only does it help Newton, we border Weston, again, right there, and they're actively in the process of designing a 3.5 mile shared use path right on Com Ave Route 30, and it goes all the way to the Natick line. And please know we're very, very supportive of the Weston's TIP request, which is just above ours on your project list. So if we fix Newton and Weston, we've got a fabulous 15-mile Boston to Natick pedestrian and bike path. Let me just add a couple more comments about Newton's. So on other parts of our carriageway, this is a very favorite part of people walking and biking. And I've just got to say, I know we've postponed the Boston Marathon. You wouldn't believe the hundreds and hundreds of people who are normally here this time of year practicing their runs. The difficulty is if you haven't driven it yourself, the carriageway, which is low stress, is literally right next to a very high speed, heavily traveled 4-lane road that has no bike accommodations. So, and it's one of our highest traffic volumes arterials in here. So what we're doing is implementing a road diet on the road portion of it and creating a really safe 12 to 16 foot wide path for bikes and pedestrians. I'll add one more thing. What's really unique about this is right now, thank you MassDOT, they're doing a $15 million bridge reconstruction on Com Ave, just over the border from this. It's literally abuts this project. So they're redoing a 0.2 mile stretch of Com Ave. If we approve this project with you folks, the MassDOT project will align perfectly right next to this. So it's a great project. And if we get the go-ahead from you folks, MassDOT will design their project to line up with this TIP project, and then it'll be safe all the way through. If we don't get the thumbs up on the TIP project, MassDOT unfortunately will design their project to match the existing outdated conditions. So, final plea, please vote yes for this. We'll leverage existing MassDOT project funding. We'll restore a critical missing link in the carriageway, and then we'll connect with Weston's work as well. Thanks. Happy to take any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Mayor. Does any MPO member have a question of the mayor at this time? Seeing none. Thank you, Mayor, very much.
Thanks, David. I'm going to sign off.
Thank you. So Tegan, I think we'll take the actual people from the audience first before we let you read the ones that were submitted in advance. So the next person I see who's got their hand raised is Mark Ryan. So give Matt a second to unmute you. Don't start speaking until you know we can hear you. Okay, go ahead, Mark, I'm sorry. Introduce yourself for the record.
Good morning, David. Mark Ryan, Director of Public Works, Norwood, Mass. I echo the prior speaker. Thank you for giving us this opportunity during these trying times, and a shout out to the staff making this happen. We have submitted comments, public comments that Matt can read in later. This is for an intersection project in Norwood, slated for fiscal 21, and we're very excited in the 3 draft scenarios that Matt will talk about later that we're still slated for 2021. The biggest reason for my speaking out today is we have another intersection project scheduled for federal fiscal year 22, and that's the Route 1 University Ave intersection. And that's located right at the Norwood-Westwood town line. In 1996, CTPS did a study identifying this intersection as needing upgrades. And the town of Norwood has worked diligently to try to get this project on the tip, and we've been successful. But some of the things we did is we, on our own, commissioned 3 traffic studies to justify the need for this intersection to be upgraded and implement the design that we recommended. We also leveraged design funds from the Westwood Station / University Station project in Westwood. The town of Norwood has been the strongest advocate for this state-controlled intersection. The improvements, obviously, are safety. There are long delays in the morning commute and the PM commute, backups of 2 miles or more in the morning and the same in the evening. But Norwood is affected directly in the morning. It's residential side streets because people are just frustrated with the delays on Route 1, and they're just finding their ways around residential streets just to keep moving. And these residential streets are bearing the brunt of this failed intersection. So in the 3 scenarios that were presented, you know, upgrading the tip, they're talking about pushing this project out to 2023. And pushing it out another year, it would really be such a disappointment to the town of Norwood and all the commuters that use this heavily traveled roadway. So they've been looking for these improvements, and they've been waiting patiently, and we just plead with you to please keep this project on the 2022 tip as currently scheduled. And I would hope MassDOT would work to move this along. We submitted 25% design in November of 16, and we still have not had a design public hearing, and we really don't have control over the design because it's a developer that's doing the actual funding of the design. So I plead with MassDOT to step in and push this along. Let's get this going, well-deserved project, and keep it on the federal fiscal year 22 project list. And that's it, David. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any questions from the members for Mark? Seeing none, the next person to speak will be
I'm sorry, David, if I can jump in here. The city of Chelsea actually indicated to me a little while ago that they have a comment, but they do not have access to the raise hand feature. So I just wanted to give them the opportunity to jump in if that's all right.
Okay, sure, because, all right, so Chelsea, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Matt. Introduce yourself for the record. We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Tom Ambrosino, City Manager, and I'm here with Alex Tran, Assistant Planning Director. We just once again want to weigh in on the Lower Broadway Corridor project. I see in two of your scenarios it's included, but in the third it is not, which is concerning to us. I would just reiterate 2 points that I had made 2 weeks ago when I was present there. This is the major commercial corridor for our city, has lots of ethnic businesses that are critical to this environmental justice community, and it is a major thoroughfare for MBTA bus traffic, including 3 of the most crowded and most utilized lines in the MBTA bus system, the 111, the 116, and the 117. And it also is one of the top pedestrian crash sites in the state. So this project would substantially enhance pedestrian safety along this major corridor. So I urge the members to consider including this in the tip and go forward with either scenario 1 or scenario 2. Alex may want to add something.
Great, thank you. I'll keep this brief, but I just wanted to echo our city manager's sentiments and then also comment on the FY22 proposed project for Upper Broadway. Upper Broadway 2 is a primary artery that supports a combination of retail, commercial traffic, as well as numerous key bus routes. That project, which will reconstruct Upper Broadway from City Hall Ave to Revere, will yield market safety improvements, enhancements for pedestrians, as well as public transit, and allow us to overhaul this outdated and substandard corridor. That's all that we have from Chelsea, and we appreciate the opportunity to provide public comment.
Alex, can you state your name just for the record?
My name is Alex Train. I am the Assistant Director of Planning and Development with the City of Chelsea.
Thank you. Do any of the members have any questions for either the city manager or Alex? Seeing none, we'll now go on to the next speaker. Drettler, please introduce yourself for the record.
Good morning. My name is Janie Drettler, and I'm with the Sudbury Board of Selectmen. Some of my comments are on behalf of myself, but also I wanted to make sure that you received our letter from our town manager, our interim town manager, Marianne Bilodeau. She sent a letter in to you, or for submission to you, on March 18th, outlining what Sudbury has done to be committed to the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Phase 2D project, which is 608164. As you know, Sudbury has been working for many years to advance the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. It's been a high goal for Sudbury for many, many years. It's a high goal for the Board of Selectmen. Sudbury has appropriated funding for the full design. We are working fast and furious to get this done. There have been some changes in the funding. I'd like to learn more about what's going on and where Sudbury is with the TIP. We also have an article for town meeting, for our May town meeting. Hopefully that will continue to go forward. At this point, we have the potential to acquire the CSX line, which would help us advance the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail from just north of Route 20, which is our transportation corridor, all the way to the Framingham line, which would also allow us to protect our water resources. And so Sudbury has, and like other communities along Route 20, we have an urban traffic issue. So I'm hoping that the MPO will continue to support Sudbury on this project. It's incredibly important to our community. And it would also be an incredible asset to the entire region from Lowell all the way to Framingham. And we are committed to advancing this project. I hope you are too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do any members have a question at this time? Seeing none.
I also let you know that
Go ahead.
I just wanted to also let you know that Beth Sudemeyer, our environmental planner, is also on the call. So if you have some technical issues for her, please feel free to call on Beth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is Glenn Clancy.
Hi, good morning. My name is Glenn Clancy. I'm from the town of Belmont. I thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. I'm commenting on project number 609204. It is the Town of Belleville Community Pass, which is a component of the Central Rail Trail. I just wanted to give a brief update on where we were with our project. The project team met on March 9th with the MBTA, Ryan Cahalan, along with Michael Trepania from Mass DOT. We had a very productive meeting. We got some great direction from the MBTA on some of our design details. So we are moving forward with our design. We are targeting a June timeframe for our 25%, our 25% public hearing. Currently, under the three scenarios being considered by the MPO, project is not considered or being contemplated for funding. I just wanted to assure the MPO that this project is a top priority for the town of Belmont. We are working with a $150,000 grant from the Mass Rails Trail through DCR. The balance of the design funds is a local appropriation of $1.4 million. I tell you that to demonstrate that this is a priority for the town of Belmont. I just wanted to make one brief comment about the project score right now. The project is scored at 42. We feel that there are elements of the project that warrant higher scoring. I acknowledge that we missed the window to address the scoring, and I just want you to know that in the future, when we have an opportunity again to look at the scoring, we intend to work with MPO and staff to try to beef up that scoring in areas where we feel some of that scoring is deficient. The only other thing I'd like to say is I just want to shout out to Matt for all of his help and his assistance. He's been tremendously helpful to the town of Belmont.
Thank you, Mr. Clancy. Any questions from the members? Seeing none. Next up is Emily Teller.
Hello, I am Emily Teller, and I'm the secretary of the Friends of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. Sorry. I've been to the MPO meeting several times, and I first want to say how grateful I am for this virtual opportunity and for the staff of the MPO for making it happen. I feel like I need to drop out after I speak because we're at capacity, and I know that about 10% of your 100 people are from Sudbury, so I hope they have a good chance to talk. I'm representing the rest of the northern section of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. I was on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail on Sunday with my husband, and we walked 3 miles in Acton, and you can't believe how many people were there. I think we still had safe social distancing. I know we did. But there were so many types of people there, wheelchairs and strollers and young people in a few groups and bladers and walkers and riders. And it's so important for you to continue the progress of phase 2 in Sudbury. I know, as you all know, the contract has been awarded for the flyover bridge over Route 2, which will connect the northern part, which is now about 13 miles, with the completed West Concord section of the rail trail. And so Sudbury is the next up. And they are working so hard. Their 25% design is in at the MPO, needs comments, and then the public hearing, which we can do virtually to keep this moving. And I just would plead for you to keep it in line on the tip and not push it out a year. Their commitment to purchase CSX with their town funds is setting a precedent. And as you know, there is legislation in Beacon Hill to use CPA money for this purchase statewide. So Sudbury really would be setting a wonderful precedent, negotiating with this huge railroad company to make their land accessible to hundreds and thousands of people. And as you must know, in this time of social distancing and isolation, it's so important to get outside. And the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail is such a resource for everybody in the Commonwealth in this part of the region. So please keep it on the tip. Do not put it off another year. And thank you for this opportunity to talk to you. And David, I don't have my cap on, but hope things are going well for you all. Thank you.
Well, I just, before I just got to say, my admiration for the Friends continues unabated. I just think you guys are one of the best examples of local public involvement I've seen. Are there questions for Ms. Teller? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next up is Brendan Callahan. Matt, unmute Brendan Callahan.
I unmuted him. I think I unmuted him right as he was trying to unmute himself, and now he's muted again, I think.
All right, so try to unmute him. Give us a second. Thank you.
All right. Hi, Brendan Callahan. I'm the Assistant Director of Planning. I'm here just to kind of briefly talk about two projects in Peabody, or at least bikeway, pedestrian bike projects. We currently have one program for FY24. That project is moving forward. We have submitted the draft 25% design plans to the Mass DOT. We received comments. We're addressing those comments now. That project, you know, we're on schedule and moving forward. We anticipate, you know, having our public meeting in September of 2020. And there was a couple issues with the cost increase this year associated with that project. Those increases were related to, I guess there was a directive to add a contingency to all projects that had not yet completed the 25% design submission, as well as a Mass DOT also added an additional contingency for potential utility impact. So the cost increase was associated with those Mass DOT directives. So I guess there's potential for those costs to go down once the 25% is completed. But again, those are moving forward. That would extend the existing bike path from about 6 miles to 8 miles, and would go from, if you're familiar with the North Shore Mall, it would go from the North Shore Mall to downtown Peabody. In addition to that project, the city is currently working on 2 other segments to, we've partnered with the city of Salem to have a direct connection from downtown Peabody to the Salem Depot. So, you know, that piece from the mall to downtown is, you know, could be a viable option for people to get ultimately from the Salem Depot to the North Shore Mall. So that's a very important project, and it's proceeding again on schedule. So that's moving along well. We also have a new project on the list this year, which is our Route 1 I-95 connector project. Currently, the existing Independence Greenway terminates basically at Route 1 and I-95. And then we have a third trailhead on Lowell Street that connects with the Danvers Rail Trail. And as maybe some of you know, that rail trail goes all the way up to Topsfield and beyond. Those major roadways are an impediment for connecting the 2 trailheads, or all 3 trailheads. So we completed a feasibility study, identified a preferred alternative plan, met with Mass DOT District 4, met with Mass DOT in Boston, presented the preferred alternative, which they seemed to agree with and thought it was a viable option. So that's the project we're pursuing now. It includes, anybody that's using the Independence Greenway now and has to go on Lowell Street is definitely taking their lives in their own hands. This will get people off the road, except for a small section on the I-95 underpass, where we are proposing a road diet, protected bike lane, which will, obviously leave users safe. And what we're looking at is a bridge, a bridge over Route 1. So not a lot of property ownership issues. The city has a 99-year lease with the MBTA to construct this bike path along the old abandoned rail line. Lot of support in the city. It is the critical link for the Boston. It is the link that connects the southern and northern segments of the Border to Boston Trail, key link for the East Coast Greenway Trail, and really is the critical piece that would open up the entire Essex County trail network. It is, so it's a major piece of the entire state's trail network, I guess, and beyond just, pedestrian bicycle users, it really opens up the opportunity for an alternative mode of transportation for folks. We're looking at acquiring another parcel that creates a larger parking lot, so users could get on out at Route 1 and bike to the Salem Depot, as well as all the businesses on Route 1 in that area, and as well as Route 114. So there's a lot of opportunity in this particular piece. The city we are a Community Preservation Act community, and the CPC, the Community Preservation Committee, the Independence Greenway is their flagship open space project. Over the years, they've committed over $1 million towards the design and other activities towards the Independence Greenway. We are submitting in a grant, or not grant, but a fund proposal to the CPC at their April hearing to allocate the 25% design plans for this project. The mayor is confident that the CPC will look favorably on our proposal. So we're ready to hit the ground running on this project. You know, we're anticipating starting the design work as of July 1, because usually the CPA is a 2 to 3 month process. So we anticipate being able to go July 1st. And again, with the support of the CPC, we have a Mass Trails grant application right now for this project. So we're very confident that we'll be able to secure the design funds for the duration of this project. And we think, you know, this is not just a win for the city of Peabody, but the entire region and state. It is the piece that will connect the entire Northeast, or at least Essex County region. So it's a very important project on so many fronts. And we're really excited. You know, when we did the feasibility study and we said, oh, wow, this can work, the mayor was very excited to move this project forward. So we really hope you look favorably on awarding this project for FY25, just to kind of keep the momentum going in Peabody. And, you know, again, we're really excited to work with the MPO and move these projects forward, because they are very important projects for Peabody and the region. So I thank you for your time, and thank you for setting up this virtual meeting. This is fantastic. And again, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan. Any questions from the members? Seeing none, the next person to speak will be David Del Torio.
Hi, this is Dave Del Torio, the town engineer in Hopkinton.
We can hear you.
Not sure if you can hear me. But
yes.
Okay, thank you. Just again, thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the project here in Hopkinton. A quick update on the progress of the project and the importance to the community. In December last year, the town actually had a special town meeting. Residents came out in droves, again, in support of this project and approved it continuing to move forward. Since then, in February, our consultant VHB has submitted 100% design to MassDOT, and we're beginning to receive comments back from MassDOT. The right-of-way process, which is a critical process in the project, the select board are planning to vote on the order of taking in early April, and I'm working with MassDOT on compliance. The project is anticipated to receive the right-of-way certificate in May. So the project is moving forward. I want to speak in favor of the project to remain in the 2020 tip. It would be ready to go out to bid, anticipated right now in June. Some of the comments receiving back from MassDOT are increasing some of the eligible costs, and that's why I'm speaking here today. We've been working with and speaking with Matt Genova and MassDOT. I think they have some details to speak to. We submitted some comments to them. Again, just wanted to give the MPO an update on the project. It's ready to go, and we'd like to stay in the 2020 tip, but just hope we can get an increase in some of the funds, because our eligible costs have gone up since the 75% submission.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Del Torio from the members? Seeing none. Nancy Broom Beck.
Hi, all. I'll make this very brief. I'm speaking on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Sudbury, and just want to repeat what our select person, Janie Dretler, said, that we are very much in support of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail in the Sudbury area and have been waiting for it for a very long time. So we urge you to not postpone it another year. I'm not sure I have enough members that'll last that long. So please, please, please support keep the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail on track for the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the members? Seeing none. Next up is Ron Broom Beck, and please introduce yourself for the record.
I think we're having another unmuting issue here.
Give us a second, Mr. Broom Beck. Now you should be able to speak to us. Hear you, Mr. Broom Beck.
Sorry. Just quick, I'll keep this very brief. I'm speaking in favor of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail in Sudbury. I'm a member of the Finance Committee. We've spent a lot of time in Sudbury on this project, and I think we've jumped through all the hoops required for this so far. And we look forward to seeing it approved, because the citizens of Sudbury have been waiting a long time for this trail. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Broom Beck? Seeing none. Next up is Charles Russo. You should be unmuted. You can speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please introduce
yourself. Hi, Charlie Russo. Charlie Russo. I'm a resident of Sudbury. I'm a member of the Conservation Commission there and a candidate for Select Board. And I too just want to echo what's been said in support of the rail trail in Sudbury. There has been a lot of work. I think that we recently have worked to get a lot of momentum in town, and I hope that we'll keep that momentum going. I think losing the momentum would really be a setback. So I hope that we're able to continue progressing forward. And just to remind people that this would be, I think, there'd be a multiplicative effect of this, because CSX corridor to the south, which would link Framingham, is being evaluated for purchase by the town. And also we are at the intersection of the east-west Mass Central Rail Trail corridor. So progressing in the Bruce Freeman Phase 2D in Sudbury would, act as a linkage to other communities and increase the regional network of off-road transportation options. So I think it's a critical thing, and I hope that you guys will support it and help it progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Russo. Any questions from the members? Seeing none. Eric Johnson?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please state your name for the record.
Eric Johnson. I'm the city engineer for the city of Framingham. I just noticed that we've noticed before that the Union Ave tip project is being considered to be deferred. And I think that might just be due to some misinformation. The project is actually ahead of schedule right now in design, and the utility construction is ahead of schedule as well. We're finishing that this summer. And just to reiterate that the city has spent tens of millions of dollars to make these utilities, replacing full water, sewer, stormwater, and gas. We've removed the concrete base that's underneath the roadway and spent considerable resources that we are ready to be started in November, and that please put us back on the FY21 as we've been scheduled and planning around that for years. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Questions from members? Seeing none. Next up is Jonathan Zarkauer. Please state your name for the record once we unmute you. You're up.
Yes, hi, my name is Jonathan Zarkauer. Hope you can hear me. I am not a resident of Sudbury. I'm a resident of Framingham. But I would like to echo what Janie Dretler and Emily Teller and Mr. Broom Beck also said. I live in Framingham. Been using the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail for a couple of years now, between the sections that are open between Acton and my office in Westford for commuting, and also for short PAMS Challenge training rides. Until the trail is complete, I'll have to continue riding on public roadways between my home and Acton. Some of those roadways are heavily trafficked, some of which have narrow shoulders or none at all. The work on the phase of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail that's going to provide the overpass over Route 2 That's going to connect the currently open sections to what was recently completed in West Concord. That's already underway. So the next step beyond that is the work that's being planned for Sudbury. It would be tremendously disappointing to myself and others like me who are becoming more dependent on that as a commuting option to get that work done in Sudbury. It's also important to get that work done so that we can next move on to the final phase of the project, which was to extend the trail into Framingham, which would be ideal for me. So I think I speak for many commuters and many cyclists who use that trail today that I think it's in the great interest of many who live in Metro West to have that completed. So I would encourage you to not postpone the funding for it and to get the work done as quickly as we can. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sarkar. Any questions from the members? Seeing none, next up is Brad Rawson. When you're unmuted, Brad, introduce yourself for the record, will you? Okay, Brad, we should be able to hear you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and through you to the members of the board. My name is Brad Rawson. I serve the city of Somerville as Director of Mobility in the Mayor's Office of Strategic Planning and Community Development. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to comment, and I'm wishing you all and your families the best from afar here. Members have seen our advocacy. 3 weeks ago, I provided comment to you all, not as a Somerville advocate, but as an inner core committee representative on behalf of many meritorious projects around the inner core. 2 weeks ago, members saw Mayor Curtatone advocate again for many inner core projects. Today, Mr. Chairman, my advocacy is a little bit more narrow. I want to call members' attention to the major investment program projects that were in the universe for consideration in federal fiscal year 25, including the McGrath Boulevard project, which has been a very high scoring project among many important big picture, regionally significant projects for the last couple of LRTP cycles. I want to remind members of the board about this board's commitment to all projects on the LRTP, and I appreciate the cash flow challenges that you all are being asked to deal with as part of this discussion. So what I would like to very specifically articulate is a challenge that this project is experiencing, because I think it's related to the larger cash flow challenges that we're all struggling with. McGrath Boulevard is not yet at its 25% design milestone. In order to get there, Mass DOT preferred policy is to have the project programmed on the tip, and has not yet reached that milestone. Mass DOT has done a great job in partnership with the city of Somerville, bringing the McGrath Boulevard project to about a 20% design milestone, and yet the project is essentially on hold from a design standpoint, which actually denies this MPO the opportunity to have a better understanding of design and preliminary cost estimating. The request of the city of Somerville is that our partners at Mass DOT continue the great work that we have done in partnership with community groups, with regional advocates, City of Boston, City of Medford, City of Cambridge, to actually advance the design to 25%. So the next time that this board is having discussions about, for example, programming in 26, we can have a much more meaningful cost estimate and scope for McGrath. Right now, that process is not underway, Mr. Chairman, and I just want to formally acknowledge the city's request to reinitiate design process for McGrath Boulevard to better serve this MPO board. So again, thank you for everybody's efforts. Thank you for dealing with the idiosyncrasies and challenges of remote participation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that come up throughout this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Any questions of the members for Brad at this time? Seeing none. Next up is case.
I'm a resident of Sudbury.
Oh, hi.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Kay Bell.
Thank you.
Okay, and I am a resident of Sudbury and wanted to represent that in my name. There are many reasons that the Bruce Friedman Rail Trail is of value to our community and long awaited. So of course we don't want a postponement. I serve on the Commission on Disability in town, and I've become very aware that our community has a large population of people aging in place here. And as we age, we age into some level of disability frequently. I know that our disability community and aging community would very much take advantage of the Bruce Friedman Rail Trail to increase our health and vitality, give us a chance to be better connected to our community, and reduce our isolation when we get a chance to do that after this particular situation we're in now. So I just wanted to speak up on behalf of the senior community and the disability community as really needing this rail trail. At the end of what I'm saying, I am kind of new to your process on the MPO. I thank you all for your service, but I don't understand why so many postponements are being proposed. I'm most concerned about the one here in Sudbury, but it seems like an awful lot of things are being pushed off. And I would like to understand better why that is happening. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Ms. Bell. So I will actually try to answer your question now, but we'll probably discuss this in more detail during the meeting. Projects are delayed either because of cost overruns or because there's something that's keeping them from being ready when originally programmed, such as right-of-way hang-ups or permits. Also, what happens sometimes is it's not necessarily the specific project that's getting delayed. A project in front of it may cost more money, and yet the MPO wants to keep its commitment to that project, and that causes a cascading effect where projects have to move out because in order to accommodate that cost overrun, another project moves out, and then it moves back a year, it moves another project out. But as I said, we'll probably discuss that in greater detail and possibly some project-specific answers during the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Bell? Thank you very much. Next up is Jennifer Roberts, also from Sudbury. And Matt, unmute her, will you?
I have. I think, Jennifer, you may have remuted yourself. You're going to need to approve being unmuted.
Okay, now you're unmuted, Jennifer. We can hear you. Please.
I'm unmuted. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. My name is Jennifer Roberts. I'm also a member of the Sudbury Board of Selectmen. And thank you for listening to all the comments from our town. I think that's evidence of the great support for this project in our community and our enthusiasm for the project to be completed. So not to take up too much more of your time on this particular project, but I did just want to express a few comments. Our town has been analyzing and voting in support of this project for over a decade and have been waiting for quite some time. Like many communities in the area of Boston, surrounding Boston and suburban communities, we are a community of country roads, narrow country roads that were not built for pedestrians. And many areas are in fact very unsafe for walking and for driving and biking. And therefore a dedicated path for safe recreation and movement throughout our town would be an incredible asset to our community and to our whole region. The Bruce Freeman Rail Trail would also continue to Route 20, which is our main commercial corridor, which would certainly be helpful to our business and our small business environment in town, and helpful for retail and restaurants, which certainly even in normal times can be challenged to succeed. And that would revitalize and bring energy and business to that area for us. But overall, we think this is an incredible asset for Sudbury, but for the whole region, for every single community that is adjacent to the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. So thank you. Thank you for your comments, and thank you very much for holding this meeting today virtually with everything that we're experiencing.
Thank you. Any questions from the members? Seeing none. Next public comment is Bill Conroy, who's actually an MPO member. Bill? Bill, are you there? All right, we'll skip Bill right now. He's a member. He can comment during the meeting. Any other public comment at this time? Seeing none. If you have a comment during the meeting, please raise your hand and we will try to call it. New comment. Jason Mamone from the town of Dedham. Matt, can you unmute him? Go ahead. We should be able to hear you now.
Jason Mamone, Director of Engineering for the town of Dedham. I apologize for raising my hand. I didn't know if this was going to be the last opportunity, but I know you do have some letters to be read, and that's when I was going to raise my hand, so it might be more appropriate if I can do it again later, just to chime in at that point.
Okay, that's fine. We will look for your hand and call you. Janie Dretler, do you have another comment you would like to make?
I just wanted, it's more of an administrative question. If there are people who are just calling in and not using the Zoom feature, how are they able to communicate?
I will yield to either Matt or Tegan on that. Can one of you guys answer that question?
If you are calling in, if you still have the ability to email me, if you could email me, my email address is marcher@ctps.org, and I will alert the chair that you have a comment.
Thank you, Matt.
Yep.
Is there any other public comments at this time? Seeing none. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Todd Fortune has a comment.
How are you? Todd Corchin, Director of Public Works.
You should be unmuted.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, Todd Corchin, Director of Public Works from the town of Westwood. Just obviously weighing in on the adaptive signalization program. I know Jacqueline has been before you guys and she's done a tremendous job, and as has Beta Group, and preparing basically where we stand currently right now. This has been a long-standing issue within our community, that stretch of 109, particularly between Hartford Street and the Lauderbrook region on 109. We've gone through a number of various projects in town trying to mitigate the abutting neighborhoods issues with the cut-through traffic. And, you know, within a number of meetings that we've attended before the select board, before the community in general, this is really not our last-ditch effort of a project, but ultimately the only thing on the horizon for us to resolve a long-standing issue. And I appreciate everybody's support and strongly considering this moving forward. It is a problem that is located in Westwood for sure, but it's also a problem created by several other communities that ultimately are faced with only one route to 128, and that's right through Westwood, and we just happen to be at the tail end of the rope where all the congestion is. I think this project would be a benefit. I think it would be a great example to show how the state can contribute to a smaller community like Westwood and potentially alleviating a long-standing problem, not only to that corridor, but to the immediate area and the abutting neighborhoods.
Thank you, Mr. Corchin. Any questions from the members? Seeing none, thank you. Is there any other public comments at this time?
David, I just want to jump in here. I was just made aware that people phoning in should be able to press *9 on their phone to raise their hand. Thank you, Ben.
Okay, so if you are, okay, so I think that must, wait, okay, so Lynn Simon?
Yes, thank you, and good morning, everyone, and thank you to the MPO for holding the meeting on a virtual basis like this. I'm a former member of the Sudbury Board of Selectmen and have long advocated for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail and presented several articles at a town meeting in support and for funding of the rail trail. I would urge the MPO to keep the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail on the tip for 2022. There is no project in town that has received such widespread and consistent support as the Bruce Freeman has. Many residents have ridden that in Acton, Concord. They've seen what a fabulous amenity it is, how it connects us. I can't think of a better way to spend public dollars, federal and state, than to provide this for the town. It will be used by adults and children. As Cabell pointed out, the handicapped, virtually everyone uses it. And to bring it to Sudbury would be positive amenity, not only for now, but for years to come. And as one member pointed out, there are some people, because it's been talked about and promoted in town for 20 years, there are some people who have asked me multiple times, will I live to see it? And I hope that you are able to tell them, and the MPO is able to say, yes, we'll keep this on the tip for 2022, and let's get it done. Thank you all for your time, effort, work on so many projects, and thank you for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail community. Thank you very much, Mr. Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. Any questions from the members? Seeing none, is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak at this time? Seeing none, if you have a comment you'd like to make during the meeting, please raise your hand and we will try to call on you. Tegan, are you ready to read comments we received in advance? Tegan?
Yep, I just had to approve being unmuted.
There.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So
after Tegan reads, let me just say something. After Tegan reads these, we will then give the public a chance to cycle back through before we go to our next agenda item. Go, Tegan. Sorry to interrupt.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Mr. Chair. So what I would propose to do is we received a number of letters, all of which have been posted on the MPO calendar site. But we did hear from several official, proponents. And so my summary comments, some of them would be duplicative. So if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I would like to go through these, but mention when I am going to, when we received a letter, but I am not going to add another summary in so that we can move through them a little bit more quickly. Does that work?
Yes, but everybody should understand the fact that Tegan doesn't cover your letter doesn't mean that your letter's not been fully received and fully provided to all the MPO members and will be considered. We're just trying to minimize duplicativeness in this meeting since it's our first online meeting. Tegan?
Right. So we did encourage project proponents to submit written letters ahead of the meeting, just in the event that we had technical issues. As the chair said, they have been compiled and posted on the MPO meeting calendar under today's date, and the MPO board members will receive and review all of them. So beginning first with the town of Bedford, David Manugin, the Director of Public Works, wrote in support of the Minuteman Bikeway Extension Project, currently programmed in the TIP in 2022. The town notes that the project remains a very high priority and expressed a desire to see this project retain its funding in 2022. The town notes that they have worked diligently on this project for 15 years. They recently held their 25% design public hearing and they are scheduled to submit 75% design plans in May of 2020, keeping the project on track for advertisement in November of 2021. In order to keep the project moving forward, the town highlights their efforts to authorize the select board to approve easement acquisition without town meeting approval. Additionally, they have selected a MassDOT pre-qualified appraiser to help the right-of-way process move forward smoothly. Moving now to the town of Dedham, which submitted 2 letters in support of pedestrian improvements along Bussey Street, a project currently programmed in 2023. The first comes from State Representative Paul McMurdy, who advocates for the project as a crucial investment in multimodal safety on a corridor that serves multiple schools and the area's commercial districts. The representative highlights how this project fits into the town's larger vision for complete streets in Dedham. The second letter from the town manager, Leon Goodwin, highlights the extensive work that's been done on this project since it was approved by MassDOT's Project Review Committee in 2014. The town notes that over the course of this time, it was determined that the superstructure of the Bussey Street Bridge needed to be reconstructed, which contributed to the increase in cost for this project. The town expressed that they are eager to hold their 25% design hearing as soon as possible to keep the project on track for 2023. They note that funding has already been allocated through town meeting for 100% design. This letter echoes the message from Representative McMurtry's letter, reinforcing the importance of the project as a key safety, connectivity, and economic development investment for the town. The town highlights the consistent calls they receive from residents about the substandard conditions of the current roadway, especially for those with disabilities, making this project an urgent investment for mobility in the area. The town requests to continue to retain funding for this project in 2023. So the next letter I was going to comment on was from Mark Ryan, the Director of Public Works from the town of Norwood, in support of the intersection improvement project at Route 1A and Upland Road, currently programmed in 2021. And I believe we already had commentary at the beginning about this project. So I will move on to another letter we received from Brendan Callahan, the Assistant Director of Planning for the City of Peabody, in support of 2 projects in Peabody, which I believe we also heard commentary on. So I will move on. Mayor Kim Driscoll of the City of Salem wrote a letter in support of the Boston Street project, which is currently under consideration for funding in 2025. Mayor Driscoll states that this project is the town's #1 priority, as Boston Street is a crucial connection between Salem and Peabody and is a key corridor for emergency vehicles and MBTA buses. The city has adopted a complete streets policy and is committed to giving people who travel through the area more robust multimodal options. To that end, this project will include a shared use path to allow for safe travel for bicycles and pedestrians. The mayor also highlights the importance of this project for economic development, as it provides enhanced connectivity for environmental justice communities and complements the nearby Bridge Street project, which is funded through MassWorks. Mayor Driscoll notes that the project is moving forward and that the city anticipates a 25% design submission to MassDOT on April 3rd of 2020. Next, we received a letter from the interim town manager for the town of Sudbury in support of the Bruce Friedman Rail Trail, Phase 2D, currently programmed in 2020. We heard numerous both official representatives from the town as well as members of the public commenting on this project. So I will move on to the next one. The next one is from Leon Gaumont, the town manager for the town of Weston, who writes in support of the intersection improvement project at Boston Post Road and Wellesley, currently under consideration for programming this year. The town notes that they submitted 25% designs to MassDOT earlier this week and requests to have the project program in fiscal year 2022. This project will address the significant safety issues at the intersection as documented in the project's road safety audit. Given the safety issues in the area, the project has robust support from various town departments, which have been engaged since 2013 in advancing the design, which have fully funded the design. My apologies. The town has already done upfront work to coordinate the anticipated right-of-way and wetland impacts that may result from the project, putting it on track for a requested program year of 2022. In addition to the support letter, the town also included their 25% design submission cover letter, which was submitted to MassDOT on March 16th, along with updated project plans. And I only have a few more. Next will be Jeffrey Hull, the town manager for the town of Wilmington, wrote in support of advancing the town's intersection improvement project at Lowell Street and Woburn Street into an earlier year. This project is currently programmed in 2024. The town strongly advocates for this project to precede other scheduled TIP projects in the area, including a complete streets project on Main Street and 2 state bridge replacement projects that will result in increases to traffic to the already overburdened and unsafe intersection. The town notes that this project will help alleviate additional traffic through this area due to the opening of the new Boston Street Bridge in Woburn, set to begin construction in 2021. The town notes that they have secured 100% design funding for the project and are moving quickly on the project design, projecting that the project could be ready for advertisement as early as April 2021. Next, we received a letter from Matt Chase with VHB on behalf of the town of Hopkinton with regards to the signal and intersection improvements project on Route 135, currently programmed in 2020. And again, I believe we heard official commentary from the town on that project. So I will move forward to the last one, which is Bill Renault with the town of Wakefield, writes in support of the town's Main Street reconstruction project, which is currently under consideration for funding in this year's TIP. The town thanks the MPO for considering the FY fiscal year 21 to 25 TIP, the project in the 21 to 25 TIP. Although the town is disappointed that the project is not programmed in any of the 3 draft scenarios, they understand that the project scope of work and cost as presented would require an MPO amendment to the long-range transportation plan. The town is committed to reviewing the project scope with our design consultant and with MassDOT to reduce the cost to a level that would not require an LRTP amendment. They hope the updated project scope can be considered for programming in a future TIP cycle. The town notes their overwhelming public support for the project and has allocated funding through the 25% design, which they hope to achieve by early 2021. With that, Mr. Chair, I will turn it back to you to manage further comments by the members of the public or to move on.
Thank you, Tegan. Any questions from the members about anything Tegan covered? Seeing none, I see we have a public comment from Jason Mamoni. Mr. Mamoni.
Hi, Jason Mamoni, Director of Engineering. Thank you again. I just want to thank everybody for taking the letters that were submitted from our state representative and town manager. Just to briefly just echo a couple things that they had mentioned in each of their letters. The town of Dedham has been scheduled for the federal fiscal year 2023 and recently was just informed of the increase that was a question of the MPO. So our major concern with addressing that through our letters is just to update you, just to let you know that the project was increased due to a reanalysis of our estimate due to the superstructure being added to the project, and also due to the fact that since we were behind the 25% design threshold, we had to also account for the new construction costs such as the construction administration and police detail and force accounts, which ended up putting us well over 500,000, which was that criteria there that kind of made everybody kind of worried about why the cost went up. So it went up about $1 million based upon the inclusion of that superstructure, redefinement of what exactly was to take place as part of that, and those other guidelines that we need to address for the CA aspect of the project. The town of Dedham has been funded to do 100% design since we were approved back in 2014. 2015 town meeting approved us through 100% funding, and I'm going back in front of the May town meeting to get funding for the PS&E and right-of-way acquisitions and the such, so we can continue to move forward. And we've been eagerly waiting since October 2019 to get our 25% design hearing scheduled with MassDOT, and we're ready to continue and make sure that we're on schedule for federal fiscal year 2023. But thank you for allowing me the time to give you that information.
Thank you, Mr. Mamoni. Any questions from the members? Seeing none, are there any other public comments at this time? Seeing none, as I said, if you have a comment during the meeting, please raise your hand and we'll try to call on you. Next up is a report from the Regional Transportation Advisory Council. Lynn?
Hello.
Hello, Lynn. We can hear you.
Great. And so the Advisory Council did not have a meeting. We are going to try to reschedule. It's not really clear when that's going to happen, but given how well this meeting is going, I assume that we will at least technically be able to pull it off. The 3C committee, subcommittee did meet, and I will save the comments from that for later on in this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. And I see we do actually have another public comment. Kay Bell from Sudbury.
Hello, thank you for letting me speak again. I am noticing that a member that is or not a member, but someone attending the meeting named Peggedy, P-E-G-G-I-D-Y, has been physically raising her hand and may not understand how to click a button to raise her hand.
That's right. I don't.
Okay, well now we actually can hear you and see you, so
wonderful.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I had difficulty logging on, so I missed the early part of the meeting, but in which you might have explained that. I am from Sudbury. I've lived in town 51 years. I've been involved with the Bruce Freeman people went from the get-go. And I'm turning 83. And I'm one of those people then Simon mentioned who was hoping it will happen in my lifetime. I finally sold my bike because I can't ride it anymore, but I still look forward to walking on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail and hope that you won't postpone it, your part in it any further.
Thank you. Can you, just for the record, can you state your full name?
Sure. I put it down when I signed in, but it didn't get on that way. My name is Peg Espinola.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Are there any other public comments at this time? Seeing none. Next up on the agenda is the federal fiscal year 21 to 20 improvement program. Matt Genova.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you everyone for being here. Actually want to sort of jump on briefly onto the public comment train here with a few more late-breaking comments that snuck into my email while we've been talking. We've got a comment letter from a school board member in the town of Swampscott in support of the Swampscott Rail Trail. which is a project under consideration for funding in 2025. So we will post that letter after this meeting and make sure that members get it. But I want to acknowledge that that letter of support did just come in this morning. Additionally, I have a comment from Austin Saganowitz in the town of Acton. I'm not sure if he was able to attend the meeting, but he did want us to share those comments, so I'll read that now. He says that the town of Acton expresses its tremendous appreciation for the MPO and its staff support. Project ID number 608229, which is the Kelly's Corner project, is on schedule. The town will be voting at an upcoming spring annual town meeting to authorize the Board of Selectmen to acquire the necessary right-of-way for the project and to fund the just compensation payments to property owners for that right-of-way. The 100% design plans are scheduled to be submitted in early July for that project. And again, that is the Kelly's Corner project in Acton. One other quick comment is from James Kupfer in Bellingham. He just wants to comment that Bellingham, which currently has a project in federal fiscal year 2022, requests, if possible, to move up to fiscal year 2021, obviously if funding is available to do so. So those are, I believe I captured all the comments that I've gotten during this conversation. Apologies to anyone whose comment I didn't capture. Trying to check my email as we go here, but if you do send me another comment, I'm happy to bring that to next week's meeting. So,
thank you, Matt.
All right. Give me just a sec, switch gears here. Okay, so I am here today to discuss programming scenarios for the federal fiscal years 2021 to 25 TIP. Yeah, before I begin, sort of as we've been doing thus far, I want to ask that you hold your questions and comments until the end of the presentation. At that time, you may use the raise hand function as you've been doing to indicate that you would like to speak, at which point the chair will call your name and we can unmute your microphone, so same procedure. I do want to take a second to thank all of the project proponents for submitting comments ahead of time and for attending the meeting virtually today. We obviously appreciate your patience as we work through technical issues and made sure that you could participate in the conversation, so we're glad to have you all here. And again, thanks for submitting comments ahead of time as well. So let's see. Okay, so this is the ground that I am hoping to cover today. So I will remind everyone of where we are currently in the TIP development timeline for this year. I will highlight some big questions that we need to answer during today's meeting. We will then dive into the 3 draft programming scenarios, which were posted on our meeting calendar. Just for those, if you haven't already pulled that up, I would encourage you to go to ctps.org and pull up, go to the meeting calendar for today's date, and then pull up that table, as we will be referencing it later in the presentation. After we discuss scenarios, we'll talk briefly again about where we go from here, and then open it up for what I hope will be a really robust discussion around how we solve some of the challenges that we're facing this year and make programming decisions moving forward. Okay, so moving into the timeline. So you can see in bold, sort of third from the right, is where we are today, which is discussing programming scenarios here with the MPO. So this is the first of 2 conversations on this subject. So we'll have a follow-up meeting. Oh, sorry. So we will have a follow-up meeting a week from today on March 26th to finalize our draft programming scenario for this year. And I'll get into more of the steps between here and there in a second. As we move into April, in late April, we will bring back a full draft TIP, which we hope the board will vote to release for public comment. And then at the end of May, we will review those comments and make any final changes to the tip before endorsing it for the year. Right. So more immediately, I do want to talk a little bit about what needs to happen over the next 7 days. Everything sort of on this list here is what's required for us to arrive at a draft tip program for this year. So first and foremost, we need to focus on finding solutions for the cost overrun and project readiness issues that impact projects currently programmed between 2020 and 2024. So even though 2020 is not technically a part of this year's tip, as we're programming this year the 2021 through 25 tip, we do need to resolve these cost and schedule issues immediately, as these projects are waiting on MPO action in order to move forward with advertisement during fiscal year 2020, which is what we are in the middle of right now and which ends September 30th of this year. So we are certainly on the clock to make those decisions and get those projects advertised before that date. As David alluded to earlier, the adjustments that we make in the earlier years, so in this case in 2020 through 2024, will certainly filter through the rest of the tip. And the sum of these changes will become Amendment 3 to the 2020 through 2024 tip, which Tegan also spoke to in her chair's comments earlier, or director's comments earlier, excuse me. So in order to allow 2020 projects to advertise, Amendment 3 will need to be voted out for public review by this body at next week's MPO meeting on March 26th, meaning that your clear guidance on how to handle those projects in 2020 is certainly paramount during today's conversation. So today's decisions will also likely trigger Amendment 1 to the Long Range Transportation Plan, as multiple projects will now exceed the MPO's $20 million cost threshold for major infrastructure projects due to cost increases for these projects. So once we sort out how we want to handle the cost and schedule issues in 2020 through 24, we can then move into a discussion of new projects to program in 2025. The amount of funding that we have available in 2025 will very much hinge on the decisions made for projects in 2020 through 2024. So finally, using your feedback today, staff will bring a final draft scenario or multiple scenarios back to this body next Thursday, March 26th. The final 2021 through 25 tip scenario, again, 21 through 24 will mirror the content of Amendment 3, while also adding in programming then for 2025, which will not be included in the amendment. So I know that's a sort of a lot of technical issues, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with basically what we need to get done over the next 7 days in order to keep everything moving forward. And obviously, if you all have questions on that, I'm happy to address those in the Q&A period afterwards. Starting with some questions to answer for today. Sorry, there's a bit of a lag here. As we're discussing the 3 programming scenarios today, I would like you all to be thinking about these larger thematic questions. So your answers to these questions directly inform the approach that will be taken by staff in presenting the final scenarios next week. So some of the questions I hope you're thinking about as we discuss today are, should we prioritize keeping projects in their current programming year whenever possible? Or are we comfortable moving some projects out in order to, as one potential solution for achieving fiscal constraint in this year's tip? Question 2 is, should we prioritize higher funding levels for existing major infrastructure commitments, which is obviously closely tied to question 3, which is, should we explore programming of any new major infrastructure projects this year in addition to our current commitments? And finally, question 4, should we, in thinking about programming other projects for 2025, focus on programming fewer higher scoring projects or a larger number of lower cost projects. So again, these are sort of big picture issues, but I want you to be sort of thinking about some of these trade-offs as we walk through the slides today. So I guess before we get into the scenarios, I do want to reinforce the cause of the challenges that we're facing this year when making programming decisions. So again, this is the theme that the chair alluded to earlier. But to sort of put a point on that, so just this year, for projects programmed in 2020 through 2024, which is, again, the TIP that we programmed last year, we had 29 projects that had cost increases. And the net of those cost increases on the TIP is this number here, $62,645,526. So that is just the scale of the cost increase problem for projects that we've already programmed. And this represents an average cost increase across those 29 projects of $2.2 million per project, and represents 11.7% of our total $533 million funding over 5 years. So the scale of the problem is significant, and that is why, which we'll get into here in a minute, some of the scenarios, really all of the scenarios, present sort of tough questions that we need to answer. And I guess, maybe one more comment or one more way to think about this number is that this $62 million number here is essentially the amount of money that we need to find in federal fiscal years 2020 through 24 to keep all of the projects on track. Because we fully programmed the TIP last year, there are $0 available at the outset of the cycle to cover this amount. And so again, that will leave us with some very difficult choices to make. So moving into some of the draft programming scenarios. Again, I would encourage you all to pull up the scenarios from our meeting calendar if you haven't already done so. And for reference, for those who can see me on my chat screen, this is what the table looks like. Lots of color coding. So I'm not going to go through that table line by line because there's sort of too much ground to cover. But I will sort of talk through at a higher level what's going on with each scenario and then get your feedback on the approaches. So as a reminder on the color coding in this table, if you're following along, so projects highlighted in yellow saw cost changes of more than $500,000. Projects in red text were flagged as high risk during MassDOT's readiness days for potentially not meeting their targeted advertisement dates. And projects where the project name is highlighted in purple were recommended during readiness days by MassDOT to move into a later year due to readiness concerns. So you'll notice in these scenarios that in addition to some of the purple highlighting on project names, there's also some additional highlighting for projects that are a different color in the name column, but purple in the actual programming column, so in the year. And this is to show when those projects were not recommended to be moved out, but due to fiscal constraint this year, might have to be moved out. And you can see, especially in scenario 1, as we get later into programming years, the number of projects that fall into that bucket is significant. And then lastly, the blue highlighting, which you'll see mostly towards the bottom of each scenario, is where new funding is recommended to be programmed for a project where it isn't currently. So again, that's a lot of details, and please do ask after I go through the scenarios if any of that is unclear. And with that, we'll dive into scenario 1. So scenario 1 illustrates what happens when we incorporate all of the cost and schedule overruns in fiscal years 2020 through 2024 without adjusting the advanced construction schedule for any of our currently programmed multi-year projects. So you'll notice that with each passing fiscal year, the impacts snowball as cost overruns accumulate, putting us in a position where every project currently programmed in 2024 is forced to move out to 2025. This scenario honors the existing year-over-year commitments that we've made to major infrastructure projects, namely the Green Line extension, the Sumner Tunnel project, and Rutherford Avenue. None of which had cost increases this year. So this leaves the existing projects in other investment programs, many of which did have cost increases, to vie for the remaining funding in each year. So again, you'll recall that last year we fully programmed the TIP, meaning there were not extra dollars available in any given year in order to cover these cost overruns, which is why the consequences look especially severe. Given that in this scenario, all of the 2024 projects are delayed 1 year, scenario 1 has very little funding remaining in fiscal year 25 to allocate to new projects. In this scenario, the only new projects that are programmed are the single highest scoring project in each investment program. This scenario also allocates $15.2 million in 2025 funding for Rutherford Avenue, which keeps us well on track to close out the funding commitment for that project in 2026, which is something that sort of regardless of the scenario, we need to be on track to do. So I'd like to point out a couple other things. Basically, what this scenario illustrates is that each additional new project that we program in 2025, beyond what's presented here, means that we have to remove existing funding that we've already allocated to Rutherford Avenue, programmed sometime between 2022 and 2024. So that sort of shows you some of the trade-offs that are built into this scenario. So one other note on this scenario, like scenarios 2 and 3 as well, this scenario allocates full funding to both the Community Connections Program and the Transit Modernization Program at 2% of funding and 5% of funding respectively in 2025. This scenario also allocates a slight buffer for our Community Connections Program in 2021, covering the cost of projects that my colleague Sandy Johnston discussed with this body back on February 27th. That's sort of a summary of scenario 1. Again, I know there's a lot of information, so please feel free to ask questions for clarification as we get to the end of the presentation. Sorry. There we go. So moving on to scenario 2. So scenario 2 takes all projects that were flagged by MassDOT as not ready for their current programming years and moves these projects into later years. This impacts a total of 8 projects in this scenario, which is notably lower than the 23 projects that were moved out to later years in scenario 1. So in order to do this, however, scenario 2 relies on significant reallocations of year-to-year funding from major infrastructure projects, including both the Green Line Extension project and Rutherford Avenue. So additionally, this scenario distributes the funds for Mount Auburn Street in Watertown over 2 years instead of its current 1-year schedule. This change in programming schedule is allowed because the project had a cost increase of more than $13 million this year, putting it over our $25 million cost threshold required by the federal government for funding a project over 2 years. This scenario also leaves $2.6 million in funding available in 2021 to cover potential cost overruns next year. For 2025, this scenario scenario 2 has more funding available for new projects and elects to allocate these funds to a greater number of the highest scoring projects in each investment program, in addition to also funding all 4 of the low-cost intersection improvement projects. As you'll see in the chart on the bottom right-hand corner of scenario 2, even if we fund all 4 intersection improvement projects this year, we still remain under our 13% targets for intersection projects as allocated in the long-range plan. The funding for new projects in scenario 2, however, as I mentioned before, comes at the expense of our existing commitments to Rutherford Avenue, given that we had to reallocate a significant amount of funds from this project in 2022 through 2024 in order to keep more projects on their current schedules. Even the $50 million in scenario 2 that we allocate to Rutherford Avenue in 2025 means that we are still $10 million short of our total commitment to that project as of last year's TIP cycle. So to sort of put a point on that, we are adding an extra year of funding, but over that now 4-year period instead of 3 years last year, we are actually allocating less funding in total to the project. And again, that is to keep other projects on track. All right, moving now to scenario 3. So scenario 3 keeps the greatest number of projects in their current programming year, only moving out 6 projects into later years. In order to do this, scenario 3 reallocates funding for 2 projects that are currently AC'd over multiple years, the Green Line Extension and Rutherford Avenue, and then also elects to AC 2 other projects that are not currently funded over multiple years, and those projects are Watertown, the Mount Auburn Street project, and then the Sumner Tunnel project in Boston. This scenario also programs all available funds in each year and does not hold a buffer in 2021 for the Community Connections program. For 2025 funding, scenario 3 seeks to fund the greatest number of new projects, allocating more funding to lower cost complete streets projects, in addition to funding all 4 intersection improvement projects. So this scenario, unlike the first 2 scenarios, shows that Chelsea's project on Broadway is funded by MassDOT using statewide funds. And sort of since these scenarios were crafted, we have learned that that is indeed the case, and that project is proposed to be funded by MassDOT using statewide funds in fiscal year 2025. So that's a project that we can sort of remove from the list for projects to consider in 25 since it's already been funded, which is certainly a good problem to have. So thank you to our partners at MassDOT for that. So scenario 3 also programs a significant amount for Rutherford Avenue, in this case $51 million, so very similar to that of scenario 2. Though again, the reallocation of funds for this project in 2022 through 24 means that this amount, even programming a large amount in 2025, still puts us $4 million shy of what we allocated in last year's TIP for this project, even though we're adding another year of funding. So you'll notice on sort of a related note here that none of these scenarios currently contain funding for a new long-range plan project. As a reminder, and this is to Brad Rawson's comment earlier during the public comment period, so when we did the LRTP last year, we elected to fund 3 projects in the plan, that is McGrath Boulevard in Somerville, Western Avenue in Lynn, and the Route 27 and Route 9 bridge in Natick, sometime between the 2025 and 2029 time band. So we still have those 3 commitments in addition to our already funded commitments that you see on the spreadsheet today. And so if we choose not to fund any of these new long-range plan projects this cycle, then that leaves us with 4 years of TIP funding left to fund all 3 of these projects in full if we aim to meet the goals set out in the long-range plan. So this is certainly something we can discuss further as we get to the Q&A here in a minute. Just a couple more notes and then we will get into that Q&A. Now that we've gone through the scenarios, I just want to remind you all again of sort of where we go from here. So again, next week, we do have to approve a final draft programming scenario that will become part of the draft tip that we release in April for public review. So we do have a lot of decisions to make in the next 7 days. And again, the decisions that we make will impact the contents of both TIP Amendment 3 and the LRTP Amendment 1, both of which would need to be released for public review at next week's meeting. That puts us on track in late April to release a draft tip for public review, and then also to endorse the amendments that we discuss next week. And then finally, again, in late May, we can endorse the final tip for this year. So moving into the discussion, I want to remind you all of some of the big picture questions, some of the trade-offs that we're facing as we think through how we want to approach programming for this year. So again, should we prioritize keeping projects in their current year, smaller projects, or moving projects out in order to retain higher levels of funding for major infrastructure commitments? Should we explore new major infrastructure commitments? And then how do we want to think about using what's left in federal fiscal year 2025 for new projects? And again, just to sort of keep us on track, we do most urgently need to resolve the cost and schedule issues in 2020, and then following in 2021 and 2024. If we're able to get through both of those items today, then we can have a more robust discussion about what to do in 2025. So with that, I will open it up for questions. Again, I know that that's a lot of content, so please feel free to ask clarifying questions or anything like that.
So for those of you from the public, the way this works is we take questions from the members first, and then eventually we will get to your questions. The fact that I'm not calling you in order doesn't mean we don't value your opinion, but we like to hear from the members first on this issue. So first up is Eric Barassa.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. Matt, my question is about Rutherford. By moving the cash flows, does that actually affect the timing of the project, or is that just something on paper, or how does that actually impact the timing of Rutherford?
Yeah, that is a great question. I will certainly open the door for my colleagues at MassDOT to weigh in on this as well. But I mean, we do have to retain enough funding in any given year for Rutherford to sort of reasonably accomplish some progress on a project of that scale. And so we can't, have sort of a roller coaster of funding in which we go from a few $1 million to $50 million and then back down. Like, there needs to be sort of a consistent base of funding for that project in any given year in order to actually allow the sort of construction cash flows to happen as the project advances in construction. But I would certainly open the door to my colleagues at MassDOT if they'd like to weigh in with more specifics on that issue.
Yeah, sure. And this applies to any project that we advance construct. Okay. So the first thing everybody needs to remember is advanced construction doesn't exist just for budgeting purposes. It's a cash flow project management purpose. So as an example, if Rutherford Avenue, and I'm making this up, if Rutherford Avenue is a 5-year construction project, then the funding has to go over 5 years. You can't extend it to 7 years, as an example, okay? It's a 5-year project. You should fund it in 5 years. You should fund it reasonably close to what we believe the cash flow is, but we're always sort of wrong anyway. But if the MPO underfunds Rutherford in its beginning years, what that means is the state has to find non-federal aid for that project in the beginning years, and then the federal aid comes in the later years. That is not always available within our own budgets. So there is some leeway, but it's not unlimited. Did that answer your question, Eric?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Next up is Daniel Elmstead.
Hi, thank you. This is Dan. Hello. So going to the fiscal year 2020 scenarios first, just since that's obviously the most important to look at. I have a question. So on the first scenario, it shows, when it comes to the Green Line extension, it shows leaving the same amount of funding for the this year and next year for the 2020, 2021. But then when you go to the bottom of the sheet, it shows that there would be like a, you know, extra like $7 million in fiscal year 2020 for the first scenario. And then in the other two scenarios, scenario 2 shows like 2 million extra. And then the third scenario, you know, shows it balanced out. But so sort of one question about that, like what's the practical implications of that? And then in terms of the GLX funding, if you were to put $5 million extra dollars on the GLX funding for this year and sort of, you know, shifted some things around for next year, is that a problem? Or is you know, does MassDOT have any issue with that scenario where that GLX funding is, you know, from 18 million to 23 million in fiscal year 2020? Thank you.
So Matt, you want to answer the first question? I'll try to answer the second.
Sure, yeah. So I guess maybe one other element to raise in the conversation around 2020 funding, especially in scenario 1 where we have that 7 million and change left over. So as we heard earlier during public comment, there's still some open questions about the final cost of the Hopkinton project in 2020. And so if that cost ends up going up here and we get confirmation of that final dollar amount, then that could take some of the additional funding in 2020. So that's one aspect. The other aspect, I guess, from a general programming note, and then I'll let David weigh in on the Green Line question specifically, is that if possible, I mean, I think we would seek to allocate all of our 2020 dollars. And so I think, you know, again, if possible, we would work with MassDOT to potentially push some of that Green Line funding up from 2021 into 2020. But David can comment on the specifics of that.
Yes, so we have already obligated the full amount of Green Line funding this year. So for those of you who don't know what that means, we've basically taken $18 million in change of highway money, magically turned it into transit money, and assigned it to the Green Line project, and it is available to them now to draw down. So therefore, first of all, we can't do anything to move money out of 20 into 21 for the Green Line. We're lucky that nobody's proposing that because that's impossible. We've already spent, quote unquote, that money. Could we theoretically move money forward? Yes, probably. It will require a second transfer. The transfer rules are such that it would have to happen long in advance of the close of the fiscal year. But if we did it by April, it is probably possible. So I think the not so short answer to Daniel's question is that's possible. It's just more difficult than it otherwise would need be. Jay Monty, you got a question?
Last year when we moved Rutherford Ave out a year and we had some additional funding, that funding went to Sumner Tunnel or Callahan Tunnel, I forget which one. And it was a significant amount of money. And I seem to recall, I could be mistaken here, that there's sort of an acknowledgement that MassDOT would come back with that equivalent amount of funding at a later time in return. Was that true? And is that reflected anywhere here? I see MassDOT stepping in with Chelsea and taking on that project, which is appreciated. But I just trying to recall if there was some kind of verbal understanding with the tunnel funding that would come back.
I actually wasn't at that meeting, so I can't say I recall it or don't recall it. I have never been led to believe that MassDOT is going to somehow, quote unquote, make whole Rutherford. And I don't know that we actually put a hole into Rutherford. So as everybody here, I think, knows, the vast majority of the Sumner Tunnel is funded with state MassDOT controlled revenue. And the part that's programmed in the MPO is, quote unquote, the MPO contribution. But I don't recall any kind of gentleman's agreement or any agreement on that issue. Tom Bent.
Yeah. Hi. Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It was kind of following up on David's question about the cash flows for green GLX. My concern there is if there's any, you know, we're seeing cities and towns canceling construction projects. Boston has, Cambridge has. We're anticipating some others. How will this affect like the GLX project if the state decides to shut down the project? And you know, do we need to be thinking about that when, you know, when we're talking about this tip? And then my general question is, you know, if you start moving money around with the Green Line, you know, has anyone talked to the Green Line team to make sure that there's no issues with doing that?
All right, so I'll answer all those because I think they're all for me, Matt. So first off, for the record, the governor has said we are not currently considering shutting down construction projects in the Commonwealth. Okay, cities and towns have, but the Commonwealth today, as of today, and things are always evolving, even where we are, as of today, the Commonwealth is not planning to shut down construction projects. That being said, this construction project actually is partially in the city of Cambridge, and the Commonwealth is having discussions with Cambridge about the impact of their decision to shut down projects, as well as with the city of Boston. So I don't believe, all of that being said, I don't believe that any decision to shut down the project would impact decisions we make. It might obviously impact decisions about the project and delivery of the project and the schedule of the project. But given that we're trying to move money forward, not backward, if the money doesn't get spent, it's still available. It's just, you know, it sits there unspent, but nonetheless obligated to the project. So I don't think anything we're talking about today could possibly have a negative impact on the Green Line project. We're not talking about moving money backwards. We're talking about moving money forwards.
Right.
So Sam, you got something, Samantha Silverberg?
Yes, thank you. I just want to confirm for everyone in case it was unclear. There are multiple funding sources for the Green Line extension. The CMAQ funds we're speaking about here are just one of them. So if we move the CMAQ funds up or back or in whatever direction to accommodate the broader tip, it does not jeopardize the Green Line extension in any way, because we do have the full funding grant agreement from FTA. We do have other state resources. So it really just becomes more a matter of how we program which funds for execution. This is a programming effort here. It is not about changing the schedule of the Green Line extension. Just want to make sure everyone understood that in case some folks were new to the conversation and didn't understand that point.
Thank you, Sam. Other members with comments or questions? Okay, so Matt, put your questions back up.
Yep.
I think that Tom has a question.
Oh, Tom, I'm sorry, Tom Bent. Did you raise your hand again? I thought that was still your original. I'm sorry, Tom. Go ahead.
Nope. No, I did. Now I'm switching gears a little bit to McGrath.
Okay.
So, you know, I appreciated Matt's comment about, you know, it's in the LRTP for the 26 time band, but as we know, we want to make sure that we're getting funding so that we can get the design going, you know, continue the design as Brad mentioned. So I'm trying to figure out how we can do that, because we all know, you know, probably getting this thing designed is going to be, you know, a 4 or 5 year project just to do that. So, you know, and we know that we've had a commitment from the secretary to get this project done. We're just trying to figure out how we can, you know, where those funds would come from and where, you know, how can we get them, you know, into the tip.
Yeah, so I can jump in with like a few more comments on that. I believe this was raised perhaps by the mayor at the last MPO meeting, but one possible solution to keep McGrath specifically moving forward could be to allocate some level of, if you want to call it, seed funding in 2025 in order to begin to say, yes, we want to fund this project. We are acknowledging that we're making this commitment in our actual programming as opposed to, you know, in the broader picture of the long range plan. And And so that would allow design to continue to move forward on MassDOT's end, which is obviously great to keep that project's momentum going. Obviously, the tricky part of this is that we do still have our existing programmed funding commitment to Rutherford Avenue that we need to execute by 2026. And so depending on, how things move around over, over this year and the next year, our funding picture in 2026 could potentially see significant commitments to 2 long-range plan projects, which may be the case anyways if this board elects to fund any of the long-range plan projects and try to keep our overall commitment on track as it relates to the long-range plan and getting things funded in this time band.
Tom O'Rourke.
Hello. Just regarding the long-range projects, are there any others on the long-range plan that aren't funded?
Yeah, so we also have the project in Natick, the bridge project at Route 27 and Route 9, which as it stands today is about a $45 million project. And then we also have Western Avenue in Lynn, which as it stands today is roughly a $36 million project. And both of those are uninflated costs, which means when we actually program them, they would come in at a higher dollar amount than that. Yeah. Okay, and one other question, if I could,
regarding Rutherford Ave. So in scenarios 2 and 3, there would still be remaining dollars needed for that. Is that correct?
Yeah, so all 3 scenarios leave some amount remaining unfunded for Rutherford Avenue in 2026. Scenario 1, I believe that amount is about $15 million, so it's a pretty manageable sum. Scenarios 2 and 3, that increases fairly drastically because we've essentially used earlier funding from Rutherford to cover cost increases for other projects. And so I believe in scenarios 2 and 3, the remaining funding commitment in 2026 for Rutherford would be closer to like $40 to $45 million. And that's in addition to also programming $50 or so million in 2025 for that project. And so back to the earlier question about cash flow, I mean, we do have to be conscious of like whether or not it's even realistic to backload, 2/3 of that project cost on its last 2 years. That's something that we need to keep in mind. Yeah, so either way we do, regardless of the scenario, we will fund some of Rutherford in 2026 because that is year 505 for that AC schedule.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, you're welcome.
John Bouchard, do you have something you want to say?
I just wanted to comment on the question about Natick Route 27 and the long-range plan. As Matt stated, it's something that's at $45 million. However, we haven't completed the entire budget on that project and what MassDOT's participation is going to be for the bridge. So that is on our agenda to work through when we'd start to discuss moving that project into the future years.
Thank you, John. Daniel?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this is Dan from Arlington. So going back to McGrath Boulevard and related to Rutherford Ave, then so this is maybe more directed at Tom or Brad, but what is the seed funding? How much of seed funding is needed for that in 2025? How much do we have to program to make it a seed funding? That's one of my main questions, since that obviously affects everything we do in 2025. And then related to Rutherford Ave, I think David had mentioned, the different scenarios of timelines for projects. Is it already assumed now, or confirmed, so to speak, that the Rutherford Ave project is a 5-year project? I mean, so in terms of splitting up that funding over, if we were to do it 5 years, you know, or is it longer? You know, what's the expected time frame for completing that, such that, you know, how we actually fund it within those 5 years, or whatever time frame it is? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
All right, so I will try to answer both of those questions, and I'll certainly invite Somerville to chime in if they would like. First, for Rutherford, it is currently envisioned as a 5-year construction project. That's why the cash flow is spread out over 5 years. I don't think it's a 6-year project, and you know, there's a chance it's a 4-year project. But right now, it's envisioned as a 5-year project, 5 construction seasons. On how much "quote unquote" seed money, and I just to be clear, that's Matt's term, not mine. You have to realistically program what you believe the amount that is needed in the first year would be. So if people believe that Rutherford Avenue, or not Rutherford, yeah, Rutherford Avenue, no, I'm sorry, McGrath Highway, can be ready in 2025 for construction, and it will need, I don't know, I don't know how long a construction season, how many construction seasons that project is, but somebody would have to develop a cash flow, and we would come to the MPO and say, you know, if it's like, let's say it's a 4-year project, because I think the amount we're carrying right now is $80 million. It's not 2020 because things tend to go on a bell curve, but it's not $1 million. Okay, it's not just put something in so that people see we have a "quote unquote" commitment to it, and we'll catch you at the back end. I should also note, for the record, again, to Tom's question earlier, there are 2 other projects who are in the same place. They're both in the long-range plan. They don't have MPO representation here, and I don't want them to get lost. It may well be that McGrath Highway is much more important to all of us than Lynn or Natick, but we need to remember, when we make a decision about McGrath, we may also be making decisions about Lynn and Natick, who "quote unquote" have the same commitment in the RTP. Other comments from MPO members? Tom Bent, yes, please.
I think, Brad just informed me that Mike T, I believe, has said that he thought the design would be between 5 and 7 million, and I think they took that from the Casey project, you know, as a template.
Right, but we're not funding design. We're not, unless this MPO votes differently, we're not funding design in 2025. My understanding of what Brad asked for is fund construction in 2025, so that people will believe there's an actual reason to start designing this project and moving it through the MassDOT process, so it's ready for construction in 2025. It doesn't matter, for that purpose, it doesn't matter to me whether design costs 1 million or 10 million, unless the city's asking us to fund design and start design in 2025. But I don't think that's what you were asking.
No. Yeah, I mean, originally we were looking for construction to start in 2026. And, you know, what we thought the commitment was that the design would be, you know, going on before that, so that, you know, MassDOT, the state, would come up with the design money for this, because obviously this is a regional project, it's not just a Somerville project.
Yep.
So I guess that still is the question, you know, is how do we get there?
All right, Eric?
Just wanted to respond to the questions that Matt has put before us. I think the staff are seeking some guidance today, and I would say that I think we should prioritize keeping projects in their current programming year whenever possible. Obviously, there's some that were highlighted as potentially not being ready, and that needs to be, you know, coordinated with MassDOT. But I think we should keep projects if we can, and if it means, you know, moving the cash flows that won't significantly impact the existing major infrastructure projects, I think that's fine. I think we should explore programming new major infrastructure projects. I think that's something that we should look into, and I think staff should do some thinking about that. So that would be my perspective at this point.
Thank you, Eric. Brian Kane?
Hi, thank you. David, process question. Do you expect votes on entire scenarios, like 1, 2, and 3 as presented by staff, or would you be open to individual projects being moved, or how do you foresee this moving forward? Thank you.
Right, so first off, I don't foresee a vote today at all. What I foresee is through all of this discussion, eventually staff will be given some kind of direction, some sense of the MPO that says, you know, and to your point, it may not be, yeah, we like a scenario 2 the best. It may be answering these questions and having them go off and then try to draft a scenario 4 that complies as closely as possible with some of these answers.
Thank you.
That is correct. And actually, David, if I may just build on your comment and say that, yeah, I don't expect sort of, you know, a vote on which of these scenarios is most preferable, or any of these scenarios to be sort of taken as is. Each of these were created to sort of elucidate different themes and ideas, but it's very much anticipated that our final scenario, or potentially multiple scenarios that come next week, will be some combination of the factors at play in all 3 of the scenarios today.
Okay. Are there other members at this time who have something they'd like to say? Because otherwise I have a couple members from the public who have raised their hand and have been patiently waiting. Seeing none, Emily Peller.
Thank you. I appreciate being able to speak again. I have a couple questions just from my inexperience. I see that
For the record, I don't think of you as inexperienced, but go ahead.
Thank you. What does BP mean for the investment category for the Sudbury Phase D Bruce Freeman Rail Trail? What does BP mean?
Right. I mean, Matt.
Yeah, sorry. That is a bicycle and pedestrian project. Yeah.
Okay.
So each of those.
And,
yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. No, thank you very much. My question is, it was my understanding that we were either waiting for comments from Mass DOT on the 25% design that was submitted in September of 2017. I know there was a little bit of tweaking of some testing that had to be done, and that was done, and the town submitted it, and I thought we were almost ready for a 25% design public hearing, which I believe, again, I could say we could do virtually at this point. 100 people usually never show up for those. But I'm surprised that this project is in red, which meant it didn't meet the design detail deadline for the February 2020 calendar, which obviously has passed. But I'm frustrated because I thought it's kind of an MP at Mass DOT to move it ahead, and we're ready and the money's ready, and I'm frustrated.
Yep, and I'm going to see if John Bouchard can give you an answer specifically about your project. John, are you there? Can you answer Emily's questions about why Bruce Freeman may need to be delayed? John, you're up.
Okay. We received some correspondence from the Board of Selectmen recently through the Secretary's office that we were addressing some of the questions that were asked on the schedule. I'm just flipping through my notes as I heard the comment that there were a couple of outstanding items on the delay with Bruce Freeman, and one of them is the rail division, MassDOT Rail, and the coordination on the abandoned rail that the section of Bruce Freeman Rail Trail is supposed to be constructed through. And we have a coordination meeting with the MassDOT Rail administrator today at 2 o'clock to go through a whole list of projects, and this is one of them, on what we need help with from the rail division to move some of these along. So that was one of the reasons when we have, David, I'm not sharing anything that you haven't heard before, but when we have an issue that we don't control, that's somewhat, I don't want to say insurmountable, but it's something we don't control, it's a risk factor. So we put out to our sources, look, this is something that we're not controlling. We're trying to bring clarity or completeness to this item. There's a few there that we've been having trouble with the rail division on a series of projects. So we've scheduled something we're confident that we're at least going to get our issues out on the table and see if we can put an action plan in place for the dozen or so projects that that we're discussing today. And I know that Bruce Freeman is one of those projects. I was just looking at the list this morning in preparation for that 2 o'clock call.
So that's really exciting news. In the past, I know Bruce Freeman projects have had a difficult time getting, such things as right-of-way permission to put a kiosk in, little things like that with the rail division. I'm happy to call Secretary Pollock at any time and talk to her to move anything along, John, that you need help with.
And so again, for the record, while you're certainly welcome to call Secretary Pollock, we would not suggest that.
Okay, then I'm happy to work with my colleagues on this call. I'm thrilled to hear that you have a 2 p.m. meeting, and I hope that you would tell the rail division how many people showed up this morning at 10 to plead for the continuance and relief of all problems standing in the way of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail.
Well, I'm expecting also that this meeting is going to wrap up by then, but I'll be able to participate in that call.
So since we're on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail and Beth Sudemeyer has her hand up, I will call her next, but I will get to you, Brad. I see your hand.
I was going to suggest Beth because she knows more about this than I do in terms of CSX stuff. Okay. Beth? Thank you, gentlemen.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone, and through the chairman to the board, thank you for the opportunity to speak on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail project in Sudbury. And I want to say I appreciate all of the comments that were offered earlier on behalf of proponents for the rail trail project in Sudbury. It was really great to hear all of them advocating for the project. So I decided I wouldn't speak at that time, but thought that a comment or a question might come up later regarding the status of the project and the cost increase associated with the project, as you're seeing on your estimates and schedule today. So our 25% design was completed in November with the submission of our sketch plans. That's the bridge and the structural components of the project. And so that was submitted to Mass DOT in November, and we've been working with DOT to respond to some of the preliminary comments and are now waiting for final comments so that our consultants can issue a complete response and address those comments. And then we'll be very eager to move directly into the design public hearing phase. Regarding the increase in costs that you see presented today, we have significant wetlands constraints along this corridor. It's a 4.5-mile corridor, and there were 3 challenge areas associated with wetlands impacts that were identified early on in our design process. And we've had coordinated meetings with Mass DOT throughout the design process to identify how we could avoid and minimize impacts to wetlands. And one of the key components of that avoidance and minimization to environmental impacts is the boardwalk. And this will be a 750-foot long boardwalk that will help us to avoid impacts to bank and bordering vegetated vegetation. And what happened recently as we were developing the sketch plans was that the geotechnical results came back and showed us that the soil was not suitable for a helical pile installation and foundation for the boardwalk. And as a result, we needed to switch to a shallow concrete foundation. And that is primarily the cost increase cause for this project. So there were some other minor cost increases associated with the 2 other bridges as we got more detailed cost estimates on them. But again, primarily the change to the foundation and the substructure of the boardwalk is what has caused the cost increase. So I just wanted to provide that overview and again, indicate that the town has funding for the next phase of design, and we're really eager to advance this project and appreciate the MPO's support.
Thank you. So next up is Brad Rawson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to elucidate something that came up in that exchange using McGrath as, I think, kind of a prototype for these more challenging conversations about major infrastructure program projects. The research that our team have been doing in partnership with MPO and Mass DOT staff suggests that the two precedent projects this board should be considering in the context of any advanced construction or seed funding, to use the clumsy term. And I'll take credit for that one, Mr. Chairman. That's not Matt. We have used that just to try to explore the concept that we feel that Rutherford, which our research has shown was about, I think, $7 million in the first programming year for Rutherford, which is of course a 50% greater total construction cost than the preliminary estimates from McGrath Boulevard. So that's one fact that we just want to document for the board's benefit. The second one that we think is useful to the question about how long it might take to construct the McGrath Boulevard project is that we want to look very specifically about the Casey Arborway overpass project and make sure that we understand, was that a 3 construction season project plus punch list in the 4th season? We think that could be helpful for the board's discussion. So I just wanted to clarify. And then lastly, Mr. Chairman, I think there may have been a misunderstanding between members and yourself. We are not interested, we understand that the MPO does not typically fund design processes, but rather that any of this seed funding concept would be about capital construction, and that we would work through the standard processes to advance design. So thanks for the opportunity to clarify.
Thanks, Brett. Tom Kadzis.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I have been unmuted, is that correct?
Yes, we can hear you, Tom.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'd like to, first of all, thank Matt and tip my cap to staff. Tough job, good 3 scenarios. I figured this is a fluid situation, but probably should say something before the meeting's over regarding Rutherford Ave. And some folks, Eric mentioned, he's a desire to keep as many projects in the current year as possible, and I agree. But there's one issue here that is revisited upon us every year, and that is the cost increases. And historically, all I'd say is, how has the MPO dealt with these cost increases? And in some ways, it's inevitable that projects are moved in fiscal years. I think in this case, to Matt, I'd say we could even have some sort of entertain some other scenarios in terms of the major infrastructure projects and the funding, because what Matt raised a rhetorical question that hit me, which was, how realistic is it to significantly backload on the last 2 years a project the size of Rutherford? And I think it's not too realistic. So there's a lot of juggling that has to go on, and some compromises that likely would be made, and I can imagine some solution coming out with parts of 1, 2, 3, and maybe even a 4 or a 5. But I just wanted to remind members of this chair that we've been dealing with this, and we will for a little while more, as the cost overrun. We know it's coming every year, and to the extent possible, we want to keep projects where they belong. The thing with Rutherford is Rutherford's staying steady with the cost as of now, which helps things out. And a lot of other projects, it's just the way the system is. It's historically, and I know we've tried to deal with it in the past, and maybe in the future. I know we talked about the design, putting some sort of considerations for design. But that's my comment, Mr. Chair, and I thank you for it.
Thank you, Tom. Aaron Clausen.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I just wanted to offer some feedback on the questions that Matt provided for us to consider today. Wanted to agree with Eric that notwithstanding the comments Tom just made, that we do, where possible, prioritize projects in the current year, given the fact that there seems to be some ability to flex funding over multiple years. As long as those projects are, pragmatically, if they're able to continue under construction. And then, looking to explore programming major infrastructure projects in the new year question number 3, I think, you know, there's some conversation around Somerville. I think in the McGrath Boulevard project, supportive of looking at something there in, I think, 2025 to move that project. And then the last question, you know, whether we prioritize or favor higher scoring projects versus low cost. I would advocate for prioritizing higher scoring projects rather than multiple low cost. So just wanted to offer that feedback for staff.
Thank you, Aaron. Jim Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to kind of echo what Tom was saying, just wondering if there isn't some consideration to give to a hybrid scenario between basically scenario one, which leaves 14 million for 2026 for Rutherford, and then scenarios 2 and 3, which leaves more or less 40 million for the final year. So just wondering if there's something that could be somewhere in between, leaving 14 versus 40 million for Rutherford in 2026.
Well, and so certainly there is. The question is, what's the impact of splitting the difference on other projects? We can certainly tell staff to do that when we're done trying to figure out what instructions to give them. Dan?
Hi, thanks. I think I just wanted to sort of go in the same direction as Aaron was just stating with regards to answering the questions. I think I echo most of his sentiments. I think we would like to keep projects in their current year if we can. I think that, you know, if we have made commitments to these long range projects, these much larger projects, such as not just McGrath, but also Lynn and Natick, I think we need to find a way to well, I guess we were funding them, you know, between 25 and 29 or 25 and 30. But we need to really look at, if we are committed to them, that we do set aside some funding for those projects in a thoughtful way. Since, you know, again, they're our long range plan, so we do need to make some allowances for them. So I think we do need to consider funding for those new major infrastructure projects, so that we don't sort of end up with this. end up with the same conversation next year. And I think I would err or maybe bias towards the higher scoring projects for whatever we can put into fiscal year 25. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. John Bouchard.
Yeah, the only comment I wanted to make on the sorry, I wanted to make sure I wasn't still muted. The only comment I want to make on the cost and the discussion on Rutherford is obviously we're still we're at 25%. So, you know, we're programming money based on a very preliminary estimate, and changes in design as the changes in cost as the design advances is always possible. So I wouldn't go too far in the balancing of Rutherford Ave at this time at the stage that we're at, but to leave us some flexibility to be able to address any cost increases or changes that might be dictated during final design that we want to make sure we're able to fund. And I mean, that's basically the way we try to do that on all projects, is maintain a cost and maintain a scope and schedule. And then if costs change because of material or contractor costs and bids, you know, that's something that we can't always control. But trying to control the scope and stay within the footprint and the framework of the original project is what we're trying to do here. So that's all, Chairman, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. That's an excellent point. So just so to be clear, if the MPO opts to leave a large amount of Rutherford unprogrammed with a first call on FY26, and cost increases go to Rutherford between 25% design and 100, which is not unknown to happen, those cost increases have to be accounted for in the MPO tip. And, you know, You can't shove them all into 26, both because it doesn't work that way, and also because then you'd have, you know, pick a number, $100 million to one project in 1 year. Others. Oh, Lynn.
Hi. Normally I have a bunch of questions, but I'm having a hard time getting my mind wrapped around some of this. I will say on behalf of the Advisory Council, I mean, there is a preference for the Complete Streets project, and especially given the equity scores for some of them. And beyond that, I guess I have a question for those who have been advocating for keeping projects programmed for the current years. I mean, what's the basis for that? I mean, is it more that the costs will go up if we push them back?
So I will take it. I haven't actually advocated for that, but I'll take a shot at answering it rather than try to have everybody raise their hand. If somebody who advocated for it, if I don't cover it, let me know. I think it's a sentiment of cities and towns rely on our schedules. They spend money based on our schedules. To the extent that we can keep to our schedule, we owe it to them, and it's the appropriate thing to do. As I said, I haven't actually commented on this yet because my issue to question number one is first off, I don't believe we should keep projects that aren't ready in their year of programming, even if people want us to. If they're not ready, we should not set ourselves up for failure next year. The second thing I would say is you know, the devil's in the details. So sometimes you can't keep projects. If every project has a cost overrun, sometimes it's not possible to keep every project in the year programmed. And then you have to figure out, even though that is a priority of ours, we as the MPO have to figure out which project we won't fund regardless. But if somebody else who responded to number one has anything else they'd like to add for Lynn's question, just let me know. Raise your hand. All right, next up is Thatcher Keyser.
Yes, good afternoon. I was holding back to make comment, but I want to echo the chairman's comment that was just made from the local government perspective. There are financial commitments, work commitments to get a project ready. There's also the effort and the battles to get the political support locally to get projects to move forward and to make the financial commitments for them to come up. And what happens is if a local community goes through the whole effort to get the funding, sometimes there are other components affiliated with the project that they're doing locally. They get all the political support, they get everything going, and then if the project is delayed or canceled, it undermines the effort for future projects and efforts. So I appreciate the chairman's comments. It's right in line with what my thinking was and what I was going to make comment on also. Thank you.
Thank you, Thatcher. Any other MPO members at this time before I call on members of the public? Oh, Sheila.
Thank you very much. Hi, thank you for letting me speak. And this is a challenging situation, so I appreciate the effort that staff has put into this. I'm wondering, for the major infrastructure projects, the three later ones, are they programmed for what time band are they? Are they now currently getting ready for their long range plan program time band? Are they, I guess I'm asking, are they on time within the long range plan? And then in addition to that, I guess I don't know, I go back and forth, but I agree with Thatcher in that a lot of these communities do gear up. So if we can keep somehow the most recent projects in their current or close to their current programming schedule, I think that would be helpful. Whereas the ones that get bounced around in the later years, they have a little more time to adjust. And also, I think trying to maintain our commitment to the major infrastructure projects and the complete street projects would be, guess that's my current thinking, although I keep flipping back and forth. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila.
I might just jump in and answer.
Okay, Matt.
Sorry. Thank you. Just jumping to answer Sheila's earlier question, which is about when the 3 planned projects are programmed. So yeah, so all 3 of those projects, so McGrath Highway, Western Ave and Lynn, and then the bridge project in Natick are all 3 slated for the 2025 through 2029 long range plan time bands. And so when we did the plan, that was sort of us saying, we're making this commitment to seek funding through the TIP for all 3 of those projects during that time window. So ideally, when TIP starts in 2030, all 3 of those projects, plus all of the major infrastructure projects that we've already committed to, would all be done, essentially. Like we would have fully funded all of them. That's sort of the goal that we set out for ourselves through the long range plan.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Tom Bent?
Just as something to throw out there, what about the option of leaving 2025 not fully programmed? This would be an attempt so that we wouldn't be in the same position next year.
So I mean, the short answer is that is certainly something that we can include in either a scenario or multiple scenarios for next week. Yeah, I mean, and that I will say on that note that, I mean, that's an option for any given year. Obviously, it's a little bit more difficult to do that as things stand today in earlier years, just because we've already fully programmed those. So we'll have to, sacrifice something in order to make that happen. But certainly when we're looking at 2025 and allocating new funding, we don't have to program all of it. So we can leave an amount on the table.
Right. With the exception of you do have to program sufficient funding for Rutherford Avenue to keep the MPO commitment that begins, I think, in 2022.
Yeah. Okay. Correct.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Other MPO members at this time? All right. I'm going back out to the public. Janie Dretler.
Hi, yes, thank you, David. I just wanted to go back to, again, comment on the Bruce Freeman project 608164, that Sudbury has allocated significant funds to complete this project for the design. I believe we have over about $800,000 designated for the 75-100% design. We also have, for many years, $420,000 allocated from CPA funds for the CSX. So I hear you that you're looking to honor the financial commitments made to communities, and Sudbury has a very strong commitment. And again, I'll just reiterate, this is a high goal for Sudbury and has been for many years. And our residents have spent their money to make this happen. So we want to make sure that we honor our commitments. Thank you.
Thank you. Other MPO members at this time? Because I think if not, then I'm going, oh, David Kozis. David?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I just wanted to say something about the time sensitivity of certain projects. Some projects just need to happen during a certain time frame because of related projects that might be happening. If you don't do it now, kind of the opportunity would be lost. I can, of course, I could think of the Sumner Tunnel for one, and our Newton project, of course, with other projects happening right in the area. So I'm wondering if there's certain projects that staff could highlight in terms of time sensitivity that we should be considering.
Matt?
Certainly. I mean, that's definitely something I could bring some more notes on next week. I will say maybe a couple of sort of off the top of my head notes. I mean, as you pointed out, both of the Route 30 projects in Newton and Weston are clearly sort of tied together and then tied into a larger vision for that corridor in partnership with MassDOT. So we would need to be conscious of that and not try, would want to be wary of undermining any potential coordination there as a result of our programming decisions. So that's potentially something we can talk more about and think through as we bring some scenarios back for funding for next week. Maybe, you know, I know some of the projects in Wilmington, the Lowell and Woburn Street projects. I know there are some concerns about the new Boston Street Bridge project in Woburn, and then the sort of knock-on effects of that in Wilmington nearby. So there's been a request to move that project up a little bit to help accommodate some of those impacts. So that's another example. Maybe one third example is the Independence Greenway project in Peabody. So obviously we funded a portion of that project last year for 2024, and now a different segment of a nearby segment of the same trail is under consideration for 2025. And so we would have to consider, do we want to, sort of make, sequential commitments to that entire trail network and help build that out in a reasonable timeline, or, are we okay with potentially delaying that second portion and, having the larger connectivity of that North Shore trail system be something that is a little bit further down the road. So those are some examples that I have just on my head, but there could be others that I'm not thinking of right now.
All right. Other MPO members? So Matt, have we given you enough for you to actually go off and try to draw a tip amendment for next week's vote, as well as a project list for the next tip? Or do you need more from us?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there seems to be general agreement for the most part on some of these broader questions. I can maybe do a quick recap to make sure that I'm capturing things. So on the first question here, it sounds like, yes, we would like to keep projects in their current year if that's possible, but obviously the two caveats here are, one, that we can't encroach too far on existing major infrastructure commitments, nor can we, can or should we program a project or keep a project in its current year if we don't think it's really ready for that. So I can put together either maybe one, perhaps two scenarios that capture that, assuming that that's an accurate summary of what we talked about today. It sounds like, that sort of really answers questions 1 and 2 here. And then question 3, it sounds like there is some interest from members in exploring what possible scenarios might look like for an additional long-range plan project in 2025. So we can certainly explore that as a part of future scenario building for next week. And then on question 4, it does sound like there's a general preference to focus on the higher scoring projects, though depending on sort of how the cash flow works out, there may be opportunities to sneak in some of the lower cost projects as well. So that's sort of a big picture summary of what I think I heard, which is enough for me to certainly build out perhaps 2 more scenarios, unless there are any sort of additional comments or questions or that members would like to offer to clarify their take on any of that.
So do any members have anything else they'd like to say to Matt? Seeing none, I think you did a good job summarizing that. So what's next on our agenda?
So yeah, we can, yeah, there's one other item here. Let me just pull up some notes. So as Tegan noted in her sort of opening remarks today, we had intended for agenda item 7 to be a collection of presentations by representative of MassDOT's Highway Division, the MBTA, CADA, and Metro West RTA. But yeah, given the change in meeting formats and the quantity of tip content that we had to get through today, you can already tell that we're over schedule. So we elected to forego those presentations for now. Those presentations may come back on a future agenda, but in the meantime, I want to at least direct you to the relevant materials that have been posted to our online meeting calendar under today's date. So posted here, there are 3 project lists available for your enjoyment and review. The federal funding program for MassDOT's Highway Division, which includes everything from bridge and resurfacing work to bicycle and pedestrian projects, as well as safe routes to schools. So sort of a whole host of federally funded MassDOT projects on the statewide highway side. So that list is available. And as mentioned earlier, Chelsea's project on Lower Broadway was proposed for funding by MassDOT using statewide funds during this tip cycle. So that project will not appear next week on some of the scenarios that we discuss, but rest assured that project is still funded. Again, that was our highest scoring project this year, so certainly a priority for us to fund, but you know, we're just happy that it's that's moving forward. It's clearly a great project. A couple of other notes. So the other 2 lists that are posted on our calendar are the project lists for both the Cape Ann Transportation Authority and the Metro West Regional Transit Authority. So these lists include everything from the purchase of new vehicles to facility maintenance and modernization. So you can see their programming broken out over 5 years as well. So all of the projects that are in those 3 lists will appear in the draft tip that we release for public review at the end of April. So I encourage you all to review these lists, and if you have questions on them, you can let us know sort of at any point, or perhaps bring those questions to a future meeting. We'll also be following up in the coming weeks with the draft MBTA programming list. So sort of more to come on that very soon. And that list will similarly also appear in the draft tip that we vote to release for public comment at the end of April. Yeah, so that's sort of all I have on agenda item 7. If there are any clarifying questions or anything, I'm happy to answer them, but would just encourage folks to go ahead and check out our meeting calendar and review those lists after this meeting or prior to next week's meeting.
Thank you, Matt. So next meeting is 10 o'clock Thursday again. It'll be same virtual format, obviously, and staff will send out to everybody and post on the web everything they need to know. I think the day went well after a rocky start. We'll probably do roll call of members differently. That didn't work, but we'll figure it out. To that end, if you're a member, please go ahead after this meeting and email Matt Archer and let him know you were online in case we didn't get you recorded as being here, just to make doubly sure that we've got you noted as participating. Are there any member items today? Seeing none, can somebody raise their hand to make a motion to adjourn? Thatcher Keyser moves to adjourn, and Tina Cassidy seconds. Without objection, we are all adjourned. Thank you all so much, and we will see you next week where we'll do the final work of the tip this year. Thanks a lot, guys.